This is Talk is Sheep, a podcast by the Wild Sheep Society of British Columbia. Come along as we take conversations that matter to you into the high alpine.
Good morning, Steve-O.
How's it going, my friend?
Good. So we just finished up a great podcast with Laura Balyx. That was a lot of fun, actually.
Oh, it was great. Wasn't sure what to expect. She reached out to us after the launch of the Act Now campaign and sent a pretty emotive email. So it was awesome. It was awesome. Yeah. Really enjoyed it.
Yeah, right on. So we're coming off our Wild Sheep Salute to Conservation that we had. I guess it'll be 2 weeks ago now, and just a fantastic event. And thanks to you and our entire team. Everyone pulled together, and the feedback's been fantastic about
Absolutely.
The event itself.
It smashed it out of the park. Like it went our first second virtual event, but to this level, wow! The whole team came together, and can't say enough good things about how it went.
Well, what amazed me was, at a normal show, we'd have about 400 people. And I kind of thought, if we get half that, be it online, that sort of stuff, but we smashed it. I think 480 people registered.
Yeah.
And in the end, the show itself, not including our raffles, we're around $180,000 in revenue. So, it's a big deal. That goes a long ways to wild sheep conservation in the province. It really makes a difference. And if it wasn't for the support of our members and supporters, we couldn't do what we did, and that was just such a big part of what we're doing in terms of fundraising, right?
Oh, definitely. And I know we were sitting on pins and needles as the countdown came on to watch these videos go live. It was okay, all right, we're good. And then it was all right, we're good. Oh my God, we made it, and it was good. We'd love to hear those that attended feedback. Fire us an email, communications or exec@wildsheepsociety.com, and let us know what you thought. Any comments, questions, concerns, things you'd like to change or see. Hopefully next year we're in person. In person. However, if not, we need to know these things that you'd like to see.
Well, one thing we're working on right now is kind of a sheep hunter university, or something that we're going to offer. We're working on this. No guarantee it's going to happen. I've had some dialogue with Nolan over at the Journal, but offering kind of a one-day session or seminar, for our members and anyone that wants to participate on sheep hunting and kind of the soup to nuts on it. But that horn aging is such a vital component, and what we thought is, get a professional like Clay in there, and he can do his video, but then also have an interactive session where it's a webinar type scenario where people can ask questions. Clay is so good on that. Haven't reached out to Clay yet, but he's been super supportive, and he's always doing his part to, he's as passionate about mature sheep on the mountain as we are. So, it's a great fit there. So, hopefully we'll get something together.
If you're listening, Clay.
Yeah. And so with that in mind, like, you as our listeners, get back to us, give us some feedback, what you'd like to see. Obviously, is like, horn aging is clearly a part of it, probably a gear talk, choosing areas, stuff like that. Obviously, we're not going to put any X's on the map, but, just having some dialogue, for maybe the new sheep hunter, but then also through to somebody that's been in the field a long time and talk about relevant stuff.
What do you look for in a base camp type area? How to source water, filtration, just everything like that. Somebody like me who's done a lot of camping and backcountry exploring, but I've never gone solo or into the bush for 10 days on a fly-in. Well, not yet anyway. That's coming this year. But little things like that. And I thought you said you're going to write an X on a map for me.
Of course, buddy. Of course.
There's
Yeah.
no
I need one for myself. I haven't killed a sheep in 5 years,
there's no
so
sheep
I'm
in
not
Stanley
exactly the
Park.
guy.
Why am I hunting Grouse Mountain?
Yeah.
You didn't say there'd be sheep there.
Yeah.
You said you draw a map, an X on a map, right? So we're good.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. One thing I will say, on a serious note, with Back to the Wild Sheep, salute to conservation. Thanks for everyone that stepped up and support our volunteers. Obviously, all the people that registered and that were part of our event. And just a hats off to our donors and sponsors.
Yeah.
There was the five major sponsors that they kicked in 5 figures plus to make this happen. So obviously, Sitka's first and foremost as a conservation partnership. They've always been our biggest supporter. And then we also had Stone Glacier, Yeti, Barney's Sports Chalet, and Precision Optics. So fantastic support there. And yeah, just can't say enough to everyone that donated because without the donations, we couldn't do it either. We need all of it. We need every part of this puzzle.
Yeah.
If one's missing, then we can't do
That's
it, right?
Completely agree.
All right, the show. This is an awesome talk. It was a great one. I really enjoyed our dialogue with Laura Balyx. Laura, she's a graduate. She's has a Bachelor of Natural Resource Science from Thompson Rivers University. She took a brief hiatus and then decided to go back and do her master's. She's currently doing a thesis. Her research summary is the spatial ecology of mountain goats in Cathedral Provincial Park. That's being done under Adam Ford at UBC-O. So just a fantastic talk with Laura. She's a non-hunter, but she understands the importance of science-based wildlife management. She reached out over our Act Now campaign. You guys are going to hear all about it, but really enjoyed this talk with Laura. Very knowledgeable young lady, and I see her doing big things in the wildlife world in the next 3 or 4 decades in British Columbia.
Absolutely. It was a privilege to talk to her.
Absolutely. So with that, over to Laura Balyx, and enjoy the show.
If we told you tomorrow that elk, black bear, and bighorn sheep were next, would you speak up? Wildlife needs to be managed by science and not by emotion. And you don't have to be a hunter to take part in this movement. You just have to want sound management of our wildlife in BC. Go to wildsheepsociety.com/act now to use your voice and demand that BC not use our wildlife as pawns in a game of social management. Act now. Or the things that you love could be next.
Good morning, Laura. Good morning, Steve.
How you doing?
Good morning.
It's great having you on the podcast, Laura. So are you in the Okanagan right now? Where are you talking to us from?
Yeah, I'm actually on UBC-O campus based out of Kelowna right now.
Okay. So obviously that's home currently. Can you talk a little bit about what you're doing there and what your level of involvement is and what you're involved in through UBC-O?
Yeah, for sure. So I guess it's a little bit of background on me. I grew up in Kamloops, British Columbia, and I also did my undergraduate degree at Thompson Rivers University there. So I do have a Bachelor of Natural Resource Science. And then through that experience, I had some experience working with the government in the Fish and Wildlife branch, and realized that I sort of needed to do a master's degree if I really wanted to have a long-term career in the area of work. I took a semester off of my undergrad and then decided to head back to school the fall of 2019 at UBC-O. So right now I'm in my second year of my master's degree in Dr. Adam Ford's Wildlife Restoration and Ecology Lab.
Okay, and what's your master's in? What are you focusing on? What's your primary study there, Laura?
Yeah, so my focus is on wildlife biology, and specifically I'm working with human mountain goat interactions in Cathedral Provincial Park and how recreation and helicopters are influencing their habitat use and movements in the park.
Wow, fantastic. So that's part of your master's program. So is that your thesis then? Is that specifically your thesis, and is that yours exclusively, or how does that work in the science world? Yeah,
so BC Parks is actually running the project. It's really cool. They're funding me as well as the project through the BC Parks license plate program. So it's cool seeing all those license plates that are driving around on the roads actually at work, getting real research done. And so, yes, they have hired me through the university to do this work. So this work is entirely my own, and I'll sort of be the first to publish on it for the time being.
That's fantastic. So just out of curiosity, Was there any MyTech funding through this at all for that study? Do you know any involvement with that?
No, there was talk of it, but we just ended up just going through BC Parks
Okay, cool.
for the funding. Yeah.
And is the Rocky Mountain Goat Alliance involved with the project at all? I think that they initially were involved anyway.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, although my funding directly isn't coming from some of the stakeholders, a lot of people are involved. So the Rocky Mountain Goat Alliance did give us some money, which we actually used this just yesterday to go out and pick up that goat mortality. So yes, we have funds from other people, but holding on to them for specific reasons.
Right on. So, do you mind jumping into that project? That's such a cool project, and obviously, this affects wild sheep too, which is, obviously our mainstay. But obviously, we care about all ungulates and all species on the mountain. So, do you mind talking a little bit about the project and what's involved, and some of your early findings, maybe?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so my whole project stemmed sort of from this realization that these mountain goats were coming in and were becoming habituated to people in the campground. So in the summertime, it's not unlikely that you'll open up your tent in the morning to a mountain goat hanging out in your campground. They really aren't that scared of people, and they come really close. And this is because they're attracted to an anthropogenic salt source in the campground, being human urine and salt, which is kind of hilarious, but it is an issue. We've seen it being an issue in other parks as well, such as Valhalla Provincial Park here in BC, as well as Glacier National Park and Olympic National Park in the States. And so Cathedral sort of wanted to be proactive with their management and sort of nick this in the butt before it became a real issue with these goats. As well, there is helicopter flight training permitted in the park, and the permit is currently up for renewal. So the findings of my research will sort of determine if the permit will be amended or perhaps canceled altogether. So, yeah.
So that permit, is that a parks permit, or is it a FLNRO permit, like a Ministry of Wildlife? How does that work?
It's a private permit through BC Parks. So the
Okay.
helicopter company has a permit with BC Parks to operate this training in Cathedral, in Snowy, in Okanagan Mountain Park, and a couple other protected areas in Okanagan.
Okay, so we've seen this in the past with mountain goats, and heli skiing is a big one, right? Affecting these patterns. Have you seen any early findings about effects on that? Is there anything you can talk about? I know a lot of the stuff you can't talk about till after your report's published, but can you talk to any of that on terms of any findings at all?
Findings, not so much quite yet, because I have been focusing more on the habitat use and recreation side as of now, getting to the helicopter stuff in the coming months. But preliminary analysis has shown that helicopter flight activity as well as landing locations do overlap consistently with with winter range polygons as well as mountain goat home ranges. So certainly we know that the goats are coming in close contact with the helicopters, so it'll be interesting to see there is movement in that.
Okay. When might we see that report? Is that something that's due out in the next few months, or is it years down the road type thing?
Well, I will hopefully be completing defending my full thesis in August, so that's with all the results, and then after that I'll be working on my publication manuscripts. So hopefully sometime in 2020 those will be out for the public, but my thesis will be available publicly as well through UBC-O.
Fantastic. That sounds great. Can we go back a little bit to like the human interaction and the park, and what are you finding with that study? And is there much conflict? I know that Olympia range, they actually did that transplant right last year because there was so much conflict. And then there's competing terrain issues with wild sheep. We've seen that in Wyoming, but I guess this is more the non-consumptive user aspect of it. So can you talk a little bit about conflicts in the park and what you're seeing there and what you found so far?
Yeah, what I have found so far is definitely the mountain goats are selecting for areas that are associated with human activity. So in the summertime, we see them consistently going to the campground and using the trail network to consume these sources. It's actually a little bit funny when we set a clover trap in the campground. When we're collaring them, we actually just pee in the clover trap to use to use as bait, and it really works. As far as pushiness, aggression, gotten far that goats are actually being pushy towards recreators for this source, but they definitely aren't afraid to get really close to recreators. And I think what the park is just trying to figure out now is getting that evidence that, yes, these goats are consistently selecting for this as well. There is some research going on out of Thompson Rivers University on the human aspect. So there's a postdoc talking to recreators, asking them, like, what are your interactions like with goats as well? Like, if you have to get up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom, do you just walk 10 feet from your tent because it's dark and cold, or do you actually make it to the outhouse? So it might even just be as simple as putting up more outhouses in the campground to sort of minimize this salt source that's just sort of everywhere right now.
It's interesting. So that kind of begs the question, like I guess we're in their backcountry, so that's the one aspect of it. But the flip side is they're seeking us out as people because they are looking for that source of salt. So it's interesting. Is there any discussion around, and I know this is not really where you're going, but, an alternate source of salt, if you had salt blocks or that sort of stuff away from the campsites, are there any solutions there or not really?
Yeah, actually 5 years ago, I think it was, Parks put a salt block just sort of at the junction a couple meters away from the trail, and the goats they've taken this block away since, but the goats are there consistently and are digging at the dirt or digging at the ground to get to there. So I think that creating like would work, and if they kept on trailing them out and out further away from the park, it would work. However, I'm also seeing that the habitat around the park is just really appealing to these goats, and they like the park area, the core park area where humans are, for other reasons as well, being the aspect of the slope, the ruggedness of the slope. Yeah. So it could work, it could not work, but I think it would be worth trying for sure.
Cool. So now the study itself, like obviously you're measuring the interaction and you're keeping an eye on things. Is there collaring involved in range usage and habitat usage? And are you looking at all that or what's involved with the study?
Yeah, so I guess that's important to mention. To figure all this out, I am using GPS collar locations. So we have had 10 collars deployed in the park since July 2019, and only 2 mortalities in that time. And the one collar has been redeployed on another female. So we have 6 females collared, and we had 4 males collared. Currently only have 3. So all that happened in the summer of 2019. And yeah.
Okay. With the mortality, are you able to comment? Do you know the reason for the mortality? Was it predation? Was it fall, old age? What do you think the cause was there?
It was actually starvation. This most recent one. He was. As soon as I put my eyes on him, I was like, "That is the smallest goat I've ever seen." He was so skinny; it was crazy. We cut him open, and sure enough, there was no muscle left on his bones. You could see his hip and spine bones just sticking right out, and we pulled his rumen out, and his rumen was only about the size of a mango. So yeah, he had a rough winter for sure.
So there's just no forage there for him, or was he just was he too old to get to where he needed to go to eat, or what's the issue there?
We took a bunch of samples to send it in to see if there was perhaps something internally wrong with him. But we just kind of suspected that he was 6 years old. Winter kind of had an early onset down there, and he might have just gone too hard in the rut and didn't have enough fat resources stored up to make it through the winter time. So just a rough year for that Billy.
No doubt.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's interesting. And the second one, do you know what the cause of mortality was?
Yeah,
on that one
so
as well?
she passed away about 2 months after collaring, and it was unfortunate too because she did have a kid and a yearling with her upon collaring. But that was a suspected traumatic injury because they also just found her curled up sort of underneath a log in this alpine bowl, and she had blood nose and stuff, and so they sent it in and they said like internal injury. So she might have fell or something. But yeah.
Wow.
Cool. So the goats in that area. So you said that there's the three parks that you are working with. Do you? Is it a stable population? Is it growing? Is it decreasing? Is there more opportunity for more range use? Can it expand? What are you finding there, Laura?
Yeah, so sorry, just to clarify, my research is only happening in Cathedral Provincial Park. The helicopters just had like also fly in the other couple areas. But
sorry,
no, no worries. As far as the past 4 years that I have been in Cathedral, there's been a consistent number of about 30, 40 goats in the herd. There are historical numbers of the herd being as big as 60 to 70. So there could be a decline happening. I'm not too sure why. However, it is interesting because these animals do cross the border. And so we actually have one male that crossed the border and went about 25 kilometers down south into Washington. And he's stayed there ever since. So we are assuming that there is another herd down there as well, because why else would he just be living down there by himself?
Right.
So there could be some interpopulation movement happening as well.
Didn't really.
So for you as conducting the study, when you see your target animal disappear 25, are you pulling your hair out, or you're like, okay, well, there's some useful data there that we can source? So what's your approach to that? Is that kind of a menace to your study?
A little bit, because although he's not completely lost on the data side, he can't really be considered in any of the helicopter analysis, and he's not really being influenced by human recreation. So we kind of consider him a control animal, but it was sort of like, why can't you just stay here? Like, we just collared you.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
So just out of curiosity, what happens, like the study concludes, let's say you wrap it up at the end of the year. Obviously, you're not going to go out and capture the goats and remove the collar. They're designed, I think, to eventually rot off, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Do you guys eventually, somebody go and try and retrieve those? You check on them from time to time? How does that work?
Yeah, so Parks is really involved. They're going to continue collecting the data, of course, and who knows, perhaps maybe another grad student could jump on it in a couple of years and use the data for another analysis or something like that. But yeah, definitely, if the collar falls off, go and collect the collar. Also, I'm actually going out and doing a census next week with Parks to check on the rest of the herd. So it's definitely in Parks' best interest to make sure that the collars are in good shape and the goats are in good shape. And yeah, I think they want to keep the study going because it is a really unique place and a really unique opportunity for them.
That's fantastic. They're being so proactive as well, right?
Yeah.
That, if everybody had a chunk of land and was cared about the wildlife on there and wanted to see them thrive, we'd be in a much better world than we are today. So that's fantastic that they're being so proactive. How's the funding? Are you guys good for funding? Are you looking for funding support if somebody wanted to donate or support? Obviously the Goat Alliance is a great, advocate for that. But if somebody was listening and wanted to help out, can they do so, or do you guys need money?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, reach out to Dr. Adam Ford at UBC-O if you're looking to support grad students. I mean, BC Parks, buy a Parks license plate. I know that sounds so funny, but clearly the money is being used for real conservation, which is really exciting. And yeah, of course, like Wildlife Society BC helps us, Goat Alliance helps us. And so yeah, any support of those not-for-profits is always useful. And it's really cool seeing the different ways that the money is used.
Right on. So what's next for you? So you have this study and you're doing your master's. When does your master's conclude with your thesis? And when you submit that, is that when you're done your master's degree?
Yeah.
And I guess obviously you got to go through the process, but
yeah. So a master's degree, just for anyone who sort of needs an idea of what that is, it's a 2-year degree, and you're sort of given this mass project, and that's your goal is to answer questions, analyze the data, and write a big paper about it at the end of it. So I will hopefully be defending my thesis, which will include introduction, methods, results, and conclusions of all the things that I've sort of been doing the past 2 years. And then that's the conclusion of my master's, so that's when I get my degree. And from that is when I sort of start to create these manuscripts that are available for publication in journals. So that kind of isn't really part of your master's, it comes after. Like page-wise? They're usually about 100 to
Paper
150
page-wise, yeah.
pages. So they're pretty, it's not easy reading.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Or writing, no doubt. Crazy. So I don't think it was answered. Of all the animals out there in the landscape, what made you
I
pick
had my
goats?
first experience with mountain ungulates in the summer of 2017 when I worked with the provincial government and I worked with bighorn sheep on the Serapes ovis testing in the Okanagan Valley. And I just saw how rugged and hardcore and tough these animals were. And then I went up to Cathedral for the first time that summer as well, and I saw like almost kind of like the step up, which was mountain goats. And I live in these areas where there's like windswept terrain, there's no food. They scale the sides of cliffs, and I was like, these are the coolest animals ever, and they're so beautiful. So yeah, so that's why I hopped on this one.
That's pretty cool.
That's awesome, Laura. So that's a great segue. So you talked about the 2017 wild sheep project you were involved in, bighorns, and I think it was Region 3 is the one you were involved in. First of all, I guess, how did you get involved with that? What did that look like? How did you get invited and become part of that project?
Sorry, this is for the MOV stuff?
Yeah, for
Yeah.
the movie stuff. Yeah, exactly.
So from what I understand was the company Filter Studios sort of got this funding from Wild Sheep Society to create this documentary, and they're looking for a student or someone who didn't really know a lot about MOV to kind of come along and learn from the provincial wildlife veterinarian about MOV and sort of the lengths being taken to combat it in the province. And so I got a call and sort of was asked, and I said, and they were like, yeah, that's all good. And I talked to my advisor about it because it was taking away time from my thesis, but we both agreed that it was a great opportunity to sort of get some hands-on management and also see what management was like in the province. So I kind of hopped on the opportunity and went out to Lillooet, the Fraser Valley, which is where the capture and call was taking place, to partake, which was a really, really awesome experience.
Right on. So yeah, for our listeners, the Wild Sheep Society BC received funding through HCTF to do a MOVI film, which is an awareness film around the disease issue in the province, wild and domestic interaction. Filter Studios is contracted to do that film. So we've been doing the work in Region 3 and now Region 5 for trying to restore these bighorns on the Fraser River. And, this has been our biggest funding support to date through the Wild Sheep Society BC. So we wanted to tell that story. We asked HCTF for funding. We've got a number of funding partners, including the Wild Sheep Foundation Alberta, Yukon, a number of other funding partners as well for this film. So that's kind of the backstory. Now, the film itself was supposed to be out last year, no fault of our producers or our production team, but basically COVID's played a big part of this, and Laura, you can attest to that, and we'll jump into that in a minute here, but we just can't get people in helicopters, we can't get people out together because of COVID, so it's been delayed a little bit. We're hoping it'll be out in the next year here, but it's very cool. It's an outreach video. I'm so excited about this. So you're involved with that, Laura. So you get the phone call, you show up. Tell us about the experience. So you got a phone call from, I think Jesse probably reached out to you, was it not?
Yeah.
Yeah. So Jesse contacted you. Cool. So then you're like, okay, I'm going to do it. Where did it go from there? I'd like to kind of hear the whole story and the process and kind of some of the highlights and the lowlights of the whole experience.
Okay. Oh boy. Yeah, so I hopped in a truck with Peter. Ooh, I don't know how to pronounce his last name. With the
Gucci.
Gucci, yes. And we drove out to
Gooch.
Yeah, and we drove out to Lillooet and met up with a big crew of a bunch of really amazing people. Helen, bios from Kamloops, Williams Lake, some contractors, people from the Wild Sheep Society, and the film crew, and we drove out to this beautiful parcel of land right along the Fraser River, this beautiful plateau. And this was going to be the sort of the site that we did the capture and call on. So at first, I think every time you get a big group of people who are all like-minded like that together to do some hands-on wildlife management, the vibe is very excited and they're looking forward to this. But definitely as soon as the sheep started coming in from the helicopter and we started getting those positive test results, the emotion on everyone was pretty heavy. So what it sort of looked like was the helicopter went out, net gunned some sheep, and then they brought them back for processing. What we did was we took nasal swabs, ear scrapings, fecal, hair samples, everything that you would normally take. And then the animal was sort of put to sleep for about 45 minutes while the sample was processed. And this was really neat, the sampling, because I think this was the first time that we were able to actually get results back from OB like within the hour. So there was actually like a remote sampling kit. And then so the samples used were the nasal swabs. And then this sample either came back as a positive or negative for the disease. And so the individuals that were tested positive, unfortunately, had to be euthanized on site by a bolt gun. For me, that was an experience for sure. I don't hunt, but I've seen a lot of dead animals. I've cut open a lot of dead animals, but watching these animals being killed for this was really, really sad. The emotion on everyone was really heavy. It was really hard watching these animals' lives being taken for this sort of issue, like an issue that isn't being like that can easily be fixed with the right policy. Yeah, and like killing these young rams, killing these pregnant ewes, it was really sad. Like I cried. I have no shame in saying that I cried.
I can only imagine.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's heavy. Hey, and it's interesting. And I wanted to get your perspective because you're steeped in science and biology, and you go through school and you're conditioned for that, right? Mm-hmm. And I've seen some of those pictures, and I could see. I didn't have the opportunity to be on the there for that experience, but you could see a lot of people that it seemed pretty emotional. But it was interesting, like you see someone like Helen Swansha, who's done this her whole career. This is all she's ever done. How difficult is that for Helen? Mm-hmm. And I don't know if you'll ever get if Helen even talks about it. She's always about the science, right? But there has to be an emotional aspect. So. I wanted to hear your perspective because it looked like it's certainly a heavy experience. And I know talking to Peter, he said it was a really tough day. You're doing the right thing for wild sheep, but it was just so emotive. And there's pictures of them. We haven't showed these pictures, but removing fetuses and there's these unborn babies and stuff. It's just heart-wrenching, right?
It's crazy. Like I've never been on one of these captures either. And when I look through the pictures, you can go, okay, this one here is sick. You can just see the mood in the picture on the people's face. It's emotive, and it really, I just can't imagine the being on site because you can see it in the pictures.
Mm-hmm.
So for you, Laura, you're on site and you're involved in this, and I know I've seen lots of pictures of you, getting your hands dirty. What kind of stuff? What was your job, I guess, as part of the process? I know you were there kind of as a character, but you're also volunteering and working, right? So. Yeah.
So I've sampled a lot of animals, from the Serapes ovis stuff to, my own capture, my own participation in the capture and collaring of the mountain goats in my study. So I'm really comfortable around wild animals, so I have no problem sampling them. So that was sort of my job, was take the nasal swabs, get the samples, and get them to Helen.
Fantastic. Mm-hmm. So you guys, how many days did that process take? Was it a one-day thing? Were you there for like 3 or 4 days? How did that look?
I think I was there for 4, and the rest of the crew, after Peter and I left, was up to 5 days. Right. I think they processed a total of 47 animals total.
Okay.
I want to say.
Do you remember how many were removed? I don't have that number. I'm just curious. I don't recall what it was. But.
There was, I don't have the exact number, but it was close to 50-50, I want to say.
Is that right? Yeah, mm-hmm. That's incredibly high, right? So it's interesting. That spring, the recruitment was higher than historically. I think that one of the herds, there was 53 lambs that was newly recruited. So it was a higher recruitment rate than they expected. So, that's really positive. It's exciting. And it'll be interesting to see what 2021 looks like with the lamb recruitment there. Of course, we were back in the field here this last week and went out and we're testing and removing where required as well, right? So this is a multi-year project for us. I think it's 4 or 5 years. Actually, initially it was only 3 years, so we got one more year in. But so you spent the 4 days there, and then just back to school and back to your thesis. Is that, or what did that look like? Were you working on your master's at the time, or were you off?
Yeah, I was working on my master's at the time. My advisor is incredible with getting us all to take these opportunities. So it wasn't a big deal for me to take this week-long break from my thesis for him because this was a pretty unique and special opportunity, as difficult as it was.
Yeah, for sure. So overall, any thoughts on that whole process? Any thoughts on the film? Any thoughts on disease, domestic interaction? Obviously, we want a viable solution, but any thoughts on that whole process and that whole experience? I know you just did some filming this past week, so what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I think that this sort of work, and especially documenting it for the public, is so important. I know a lot of people in my family who aren't in the field as me, aren't hunters, and they don't know that these sort of things are an issue. So I think that creating documentaries about it is a really useful way to actually get public support and public knowledge of these important topics. Although it was difficult to go through, I know that it was worth it for the betterment of the herd, and I know that getting these sorts of difficult topics out to the public will just make them care more and sort of saying like, look, like these sheep are dying and this is really sad, and that's is going to make them care about it, and hopefully that we won't have to keep doing this 10 years down the road.
Yeah, well said, right? That's one thing that we always talk about. I don't think you met him. Chris Barker's our project's chair, and he's kind of the lead on the Movi project for us in the Fraser. And we always talk about this, like, look at the cost of what's involved with that small herd. We spent, I think it was $160,000 budget, and that doesn't include the film, of course, but $160,000 budget in year one. What does it cost to have these healthy sheep? So, we got to find some solution, and obviously be very respectful of the domestic producers, and obviously we all know that the best scenario is to keep these sheep apart, but easier said than done, right? So
yes, definitely.
Yeah. Interesting. So, okay, well, very cool. Any other thoughts on that? Anything you want to talk about on the Movi subject? I think we've covered a lot of it, but am I missing anything?
I don't think so. I think that was a nice little summary.
Okay, cool, fantastic. So, are you done? Like, I know you did some filter filming this past couple of days to try and wrap that up. Is there anything left on the horizon for that, or are you all good there?
I think I'm all good. When I said goodbye, I was like, thanks so much for this, and they reminded me that it's not over until they actually produce the movie. So I'm finished for now, but right. I might be seeing them again.
Any desire to get back in the field to see it again, or are you interested in doing any more work on that? Or do you see your work moving forward more on the mountain goat side of things, or what are your thoughts there?
No, I would love to get out more. Although I'm doing my master's on mountain goats, I know that I probably won't be working with them for my whole life. So any experience with any animal, I'm always really, really keen to get on board with. If you have any extra work for me. Fantastic.
Well, that's great.
Absolutely.
I'm sure we do, actually. So
absolutely we do.
Cool. So that kind of brings us to our next subject. So actually, the way we connected, and I knew about you and I knew of you, but you reached out. So Wild Sheep Society BC, we launched our Act Now campaign, which was kind of in response to, a document produced by the Rain Coast around social license to hunt. And, the hunting community is a little bit upset about this and a little bit worked up about some of the, the concepts of it. So we released our campaign, and you reached out and said, hey, this is interesting. We have some, I guess, mutual interests with regards to science here. And, we really think that's what we should be focusing on. You kind of you brought up the point that, is this an emotional campaign, or should we just stick to the science? And you brought up some really good points. So I reached out to you, and we had a really long discussion. I think we talked almost an hour on this, and I think we're mostly in agreement with everything that we talked about. So, this is a great opportunity, I think, for us to bridge that gap. Like, obviously, we're hunter conservationists. That's what we do through the Wild Sheep Society BC. Obviously, we're conservationists first, but mostly funded by hunters. You've worked with us. You've seen the conservation side of things, and you kind of said, well, why aren't we focusing on the conservation aspect, and why aren't we telling that story? And I agree with you 100%. So love to hear your perspective on just, our dialogue back and forth. And then we'll kind of jump into the nuts and bolts about, how there's been this push away from science-based wildlife management. We'll get into that later, but let's just talk about, I guess holistically about our initial transaction,
For sure.
you and I.
Yeah.
So.
I was really excited to see push for science-based policy. This is something that I'm really passionate about, especially as a young scientist. It's like I want to see the work that I'm putting my life into actually go towards something. And I know that it's hard, especially with so many other things going on right now. It's hard to get these politicians focus on wildlife. I think that it kind of ties into my whole idea of not one person or one stakeholder owns wildlife, and it's owned by everyone, and it's owned by hunters, scientists, the public, just anyone who likes the outdoors. And so seeing this sort of push of we as hunters need to rally up each other and push for this as hunters, I think I just felt that there was a lot of voices that you could have used that were missing from that campaign. And I think that if you did include those voices in this, then it would be even stronger when it goes across your MLA's desk, and perhaps get more interest in that. So that was where I was coming from as a scientist and not a non-hunter, but who supports hunting, of course. And I talked to some of my lab colleagues about this, and they were in agreement. And so that's when I sort of decided to write up that email, just to not to say shame, but to hopefully try to collaborate, which obviously has worked, and I'm really happy that we're doing this.
Yeah, and I 100% agree. And really, right from the get-go, before this campaign was released to the public, our committee sat down and we said, there's a lot of vested interests beyond our community here, and we need to reach out and we need to build those bridges. So, you brought up a very good point, and if you look at it from the outside, you're like, oh, these idiots are taking this on their own. This is kind of, and I explained this to you earlier, but the principle is internally we were trying to build support for it and make sure that hunters got involved. But certainly, we think that everyone affected by a move away from science-based wildlife management should be involved. So certainly the science community first and foremost, right? As a scientist, to me, and a biologist, that would be like, hey, to me, this would be really bad when I see a paper like Raincoast published there. But also a number of other, stakeholders and user groups like, industry professionals. You look at the ag industry, right? If you don't have that ability to manage predation, that's a huge issue for you. Mm-hmm. And it just goes on and on and on and on beyond that. So we totally agree with you. And I think we're on the same page with regards to that. So now I got a question for you, Laura. With regards to the science community, when you see a document come out from Raincoast like that, U of Vic, that it's academia, it's science, it's biology, and then you see a paper like that, how does your community react? I know how you reacted. You're like, we need to stick to science, but how does the community? And I know, government biologists, it's tough for them because they can't say anything, right? They can't say they disagree or they can't take a position. Basically, it's part of their contract. But holistically, your community, how do you guys react to something like this when you get a paper? Like Chris Daramont's
of course, it sparks conversation, and I am in a very collaborative lab where we have lots of different voices. And half of us don't hunt, and I think throughout my scientific career, I've had to sort of find where my own voice is in that, and I definitely try to see things from all different aspects and all different sides. So when this paper was published, I know some of the hunters in my lab got kind of up in arms as well, feeling a bit threatened. But we also had to consider and we discussed sort of he did have some good points and he did have some good solutions. And although he sort of took his anger out on the hunter side, I do think that saying that a lot of wildlife enthusiasts aren't hunters, and hunters do sort of make up a small population of British Columbia. And I think in him trying to get these other voices included, he kind of had to be mean to this other group of people who really are good for the hunting community. And I also, I don't think that there is on the table currently in British Columbia any bans that are coming up. Is that correct? I'm sure you guys would know more. But this hasn't really sparked any movement politically, has there, in terms of banning wildlife hunts?
No, I don't think Daramont's paper, that Raincoast paper specifically, has precipitated anything. Although there has been talk, obviously we've seen the Premier last month talking about this Takaya issue and about looking at changing wolf regulations for trappers and that sort of stuff. But it certainly has sparked debate around it. And I guess kind of our argument for that is that, with the grizzly bear, we just kind of sat back and we weren't proactive. We were pretty silent about it. And then a change of government, and all of a sudden it ended one day, and it was sort of too late. So, we kind of felt that, when people come out with, information that we don't feel is reflective, of science and where we hang our hat on. The one thing that the wildlife community hangs their hat on in North America is the North American wildlife model, right? So for conservation. So that's what we hang, and they do not support that. The Raincoast does not support that whatsoever. And it's been an amazing success, right? We look at, the how wild sheep have rebounded, wild turkeys, whitetail. It's been very, very successful, right? So it's a model that's worked, and they discount that model. So now they come out with a new policy, and realistically, so just out of curiosity, Laura, if they took science out of the equation and were managing wildlife kind of on emotion or social values, where do you see that going long term? I'm just curious. I have a perspective, but maybe I'm not a scientist, so I'd like to kind of know where you think, if they were basing it it was emotional or societal values. And the one thing Chris Daramont talks about quite often is individual animals. They look at individual animals where, wildlife managers like yourself look at it as a population basis, right? So if we started doing that, what does that do for wildlife?
Yeah,
Numbers,
I think you just have to remember that everything in the landscape affects 1,000 other things. So if you take one thing out, then that's going to have cascading effects. I really hope that policy doesn't move completely towards emotional based. I can even think about in my study system how kind of detrimental that would be if people come to Cathedral to see goats, so we just let that habituation happen, and then suddenly someone gets really hurt from a goat, and then it's the goat's fault. Anyways, you can just waterfall, and there's so many different examples of where this is an issue. And I think we just all have to learn from past mistakes. We have to learn from what the grizzly hunt ban will do to populations, and hopefully this learning will make us hopefully go back on that eventually. But yeah, I think losing science and policy would be really sad for populations and the landscape in general.
Yeah, it's interesting. One of the things that, we've been reading about is, so Dr. Rob Soroya came up with an adaptive management strategy around caribou, and that sort of supported the wolf call. And in June of 2020, then Raincoast came out with a paper that was spearheaded by Chris Daramont that basically called into question that paper and said we should move to the ecotyping principle around this, which they were arguing that they should stop the call, right? So, but one of the things that, I'm not sure if it was Raincoast or if it was Pack Wild, but basically said, just let caribou go. They're going to die anyway. They're the weaker species. They're going to go. So, what's your approach? I'm curious to see, from a scientific aspect, what's your approach to something like that? Do we just give up on a species that's kind of a weaker species? Do we give up on the caribou? Do we give up on other species when, there's a stronger species, or do we fight for them? What's the science world approach to something like that?
Caribou is a very hot topic in my lab. We talk about it a lot. So I don't study caribou, I don't study wolves, I don't study that system, so I don't want to speak specifically to that. But I will say with this whole thing, especially with the fighting about wolves, how right now I kind of agree with Rob on how right now this whole wolf call is saving caribou for now. However, this is the proximate cause, and realistically, we need to focus on the ultimate cause, which is forestry. And so I feel like making these wolf papers super popular is taking away and diminishing what actually needs to be in the public eye right now, which is that forestry and degrading habitat and taking away habitat is the root cause of all of this. And if we just fix that, then we would fix everything else, I think. So that's how I feel about that.
Yeah, so my understanding is, no question, I think that's the one thing where we will agree with Raincoast is that habitat's the issue. But the short-term solution is predator management. So, and I guess that's the question. If we see that there's something we can fix with habitat down the road, it's probably, in my opinion, it's worth saving caribou for. We might as well, because the thing is, wolves are not at risk of. There's nobody talking about wolf numbers being a concern on the too low side, right? That's just not an issue. They're very, they have a high reproductive rate. They're going to be back there, and if you don't, and I guess the counter argument is there's a lot of time, money, and effort spent in managing wolves because you have to do it every year. It's not, you just don't do it once and then it goes away. So I get that aspect of it. So, but I guess for us is that, to me, a caribou is worth fighting for. And yeah, we need to change the habitat piece, and we should all be advocating for that. But also in the short term, let's manage wolves. But I think it was Pack Wild. I've got a statement from one of their directors that basically said, caribou's done, just let them die. You might as well let it happen short term instead of long term, and don't kill wolves in the interim. And the problem is with wolves, they just don't stop at caribou. Once that source of food's gone, then they move on to the next food source where we have dwindling moose. Anyway.
We can keep going and going and going. Yeah, I know. I definitely think caribou's worth fighting for. It's like, why would you just let an animal that we've clearly let down go because we have to make these hard decisions? It's a slippery slope, that one.
Yeah, exactly. Like,
hard to talk about.
why are caribou not as important as the cute and cuddlies, right? I don't get it.
So we kind of got this divisive issue, and one of the things you said to me, Laura, is we got to do a better job of bringing people together and talking about conservation. So, we've kind of got, two people on the end. We got hunters on one side. We've got, groups like Raincoast on the other, that we both have our perspectives. And then we kind of have the 85% in the middle. So how can we move us? And I don't think we'll ever sit side by side with Raincoast and sing Kumbaya, but how do we bring that movement together, and what can we do to further our conservation movements, to see healthy animals on the landscape? What approach do we need from you, from a scientist perspective? What do we need to do differently to make this, to do a better job?
Loaded question.
Yeah, and I think that's just what humans are like. Like, there will always be people on polar opposites, and we have to meet those people in the middle and try to figure out how to even out the sides. But I think that today people just don't know about wildlife issues, and the general public just will hop on the first thing that they see, and they'll hop on the first thing that gives them emotion. So right now people are getting emotional about wolves being killed, for example, whereas they are kind of hiding the fact that caribou are also being killed because of this. So it's kind of like, I feel like you have to get to the public early on and tell them sort of your side of things so that they can get on whichever train they want, instead of just feeling that they need to go on the one that's the loudest, if that makes sense. And I think how we can do this, especially, is through social media. Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. There's lots of science, and just bragging about all the good things that you do for wildlife, because I know that a lot of people don't associate Wild Sheep Society of BC and the Goat Alliance with actual conservation. And I know a lot of my friends, I've bought stickers for everyone of the Goat Alliance, and I'm like, support conservation. This is real action, this is real money, and not every dollar that they spent is going towards hunting, and you don't have to. And also just helping those people who don't hunt understand that hunting is conservation, and supporting groups that actually care about animals on the landscape.
Yeah, well said. Yeah, we found it's tough to share that message, right? To get that message in front of the non-hunting public, and just the conservation work we do. And that's the thing is the Wild Sheep Society of BC, we spent $270,000 last year on conservation alone. That's all, and that's a lot of money on the ground for wild sheep, right? And and hunters are doing that day in and day out everywhere, right? You look at how many spring cleanups there are that on the island here. There's dozens of groups that get together that pick up garbage and better the habitat, right? But it very rarely makes the news. It maybe does in these small communities. It maybe makes the local paper, but you're not going to see it on the front page of the Vancouver Sun ever, right? So. And that's when we do get that press about the good work we're doing for conservation in some of these bigger publications. It's fantastic, right? But unfortunately, we get a professor at UVic that basically comes in, writes into the Globe and Mail, and undermines what we're trying to do as hunters, right? So it's tough for sure. So we need to bridge that gap, I think, right? And I think certainly for the science community. You guys are our backbone. We rely on you. Like if scientists say you're not going to hunt sheep, we're not going to hunt sheep. There's no debate. It's not. We're not going to fight you on it. If a politician says it, we'll fight it. But if you say it because it's a conservation concern, hunters are obviously always going to be the first ones to stop it. And I really think that the resounding success of wildlife management in North America is at the heart of the hunting community. You look at wild sheep. And of course, backed by science, but hunters were a big part of bringing those species back in a number of cases, right? So, anyway, I'm off my soapbox. So, Laura, for you, what are your next steps? So, you got your master's, that'll conclude. When will you wrap up? When will you challenge your thesis? When do you see that
so I'm
completed?
In the middle of data analysis right now, so we'll hopefully be finalizing my results by the end of April. And then from there, it'll be writing the thesis and then handing it into UBC-O and hopefully defend. So hopefully we'll find a job. I'll honestly take a job doing anything in September, whether that be technician work, biology work, consulting work. I'm not picky as of right now. I think in the long term, though, policy is very appealing to me because I like my voice being heard and I like making change. And I think that a reason that science-based policy is an issue right now is because not a lot of scientists are also politicians. So I would like to perhaps one day bridge that gap there and hopefully use both of my skill sets to make that change myself and help others make that change as well.
So in the ideal world, Laura, you challenge your thesis, you get the green light. Where would you like dream job? You walk out of the lab and you're going to go pick your job. Where would it be? What are you going to do?
I grew up in Thompson, Okanagan. I love Penticton. I've loved Penticton ever since I lived there in 2017. So the goal is definitely to go back there. Honestly, just working for the government as a wildlife biologist for a while would be awesome. Love to get that survey experience, that hands-on management experience. So that'd be really cool. So if you know anyone, give me a good reference. But yeah.
Absolutely. Any particular species that you'd love to work with? It like you mentioned these mountain animals that you find intriguing. Is that where you'd like to go?
Yeah,
or
I
do you have
definitely feel like I have
anything
an
else
affinity for ungulates now that I've learned so much about them. I love their movements. I think they're really cool and beautiful animals. So I'd love to specialize with them, but I mean, I think all animals are cool. So I'll take anything.
Well, fantastic, Laura. Can't thank you enough for your time. And I have a feeling we're going to see more of you. This isn't the last time. I have a feeling that there's some pretty cool things out there for you on the horizon in terms of wildlife management in the province. And I want to commend you. You reached out pretty early on when Act Now came out, and pretty emotive email. I could tell that this was not a passive email. And you brought up some very valid points, and I certainly listened to them, and I agreed with 99.9% of what you're saying. And I think it's really important that we all make sure we let our voices be heard for wildlife management and sticking to science-based. principles. And I think that, any chance that we can work together moving forward to sort of communicate that to our elected officials to make sure they stay the course is pretty
definitely
important. So
we're all fighting the same fight.
That's
cool.
great.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for having me on. This was really exciting, and yeah, thanks for all the great work that you do.
Yeah, and can we get you back? So once you're done you reach out to us once you're done your thesis, and whenever you can talk about it, I'd like to talk about the findings and go into all that stuff, especially the non-consumptive user aspect in the backcountry and the effects it's having. That's something that with wild sheep we're very concerned about. You put a mountain biking trail through prime, lambing habitat or something like that. It's something that we're concerned about, right? So obviously we want people to be in the backcountry and have an opportunity to use it, but also we want to see places where wild sheep can be wild.
Yeah,
and all other
definitely.
species
I'll definitely
too, right?
contact you about that. Yeah, non-consumptive recreation is a whole
whole
other
other
can of
podcast.
worms. But it's really important. And I think in BC right now, especially, people don't realize that they do have an impact on wildlife, even though they aren't
That's right.
consuming it.
That's right.
So yeah, if we could do another podcast on just that, that would be
Absolutely.
great.
No, seriously, I'd love to. I think it's really important. And it's really interesting. If you look down south, like in California and stuff, there's people going through these, out down there that like thousands of people per day on these trails, right? The hiking in the Rockies and stuff. Literally, it's just person after person after person, and just even that, like the waste and all that aspect of it. There's such an impact, and we're very lucky in beautiful British Columbia that we have a very small population base, but we know that's changing, right? So what does BC look like when there's 20 million or 40 million people? And we have to ask ourselves that. We have to start having those conversations. So
I even
it is,
for sure.
it is, but
Even
we
though
can't
my
ignore it,
advisor brought
right?
up a really good point last week. We were kind of talking about changing the historical baselines and kind of shifting into like a new normal of conservation. But even just with the example of Jasper National Park, where we recently lost another caribou herd off the landscape, and it's like you have the protected area, you have the habitat. What else is happening?
That's right.
It's not just habitat. It's all these other aspects, and it being a national park might say something about that. So interesting stuff for sure.
Yeah, lots of challenges ahead, and you're just getting going. So we're going to
boy.
look to you to save wildlife in British Columbia. So yeah,
No big deal.
nothing serious.
No
So,
pressure.
A little bit of weight, yeah.
yeah, awesome, Laura. Thanks for your
thanks, you
time,
guys
and
too.
have a wonderful day.